Today we have a guest, Kathryn. Look at your easel. Awesome.
I'm all set up.
Very good.
So I put 2 coats of like a base, like gesso on it, just so I had a base coat. It's white, just a plain white.
Plain white. Okay, that's a good hint for anybody who's setting up their art supplies. So, Kathryn, really excited to have you today. Can you introduce yourself to everybody real quick?
Sure. My name is Kathryn Monaco Douglas, and I live in Long Island, New York, originally from Brooklyn, which you could tell by my accent. And I was widowed when I was 42 years old. I was a respiratory technician when I first got married. And when my husband passed away, I couldn't go back to what I had done previously because it was too many years in between. I hadn't worked for 19 years. So the only thing I knew how to do was paint. God gave me this gift. I never went to art school. I just knew how to paint. And after I started painting to support my kids and I started taking more classes to help me with my business. And that's how I supported us. So after 5 years after my loss, I remarried. I married a widower who had 3 kids, and I adopted his 3 kids. A year after we were married, I started widow groups, and that was in the year of 2006. So since 2006 till today, I've been running bereavement groups for young widow and widowers and for children who've lost a parent from the ages of 14 and 17 and then like young adults.
Wow, it's really expanded.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of facilitators and a lot of groups going on. It's, it really has expanded and it's helped a lot of people. And we did it all before social media. And I'm just new to Instagram. I really was doing everything on Facebook and busy working. So I never really had time to really get onto social media. I guess we stumbled across each other on the gram and
we did,
and it's just funny that you're an art therapist and I'm into art. So it kind of works out to be a nice relationship.
It really is nice. Blue Eyes just said you're a living angel.
Thank you. It's one of the girls in my group. So should I start doing the clouds while we're doing clouds? And I used to paint a lot of murals. And the same thing with the clouds, the same. So I mixed an acrylic, light blue and white together. It's blue and a white. And I put glaze in there. And I'm just going to apply it on the board. Mm-hmm. And I would use this in the background of all my murals for the children's rooms and then paint butterflies and birds. I have a damp rag, and it's just a padding of the rag. Mm-hmm. And there's some glaze in there to keep it wet and have some open time. But this is also a technique that I would do just like for faux finishing and do a whole wall with this. In different colors, it looks different.
And for the glaze, are you using something that's specifically called glaze?
Nope, it's called glaze, and you can mix it with house paint or regular acrylic paint. And it's just a light padding, and then I'm going to hit it with a soft brush. So, when I do a room, I would tape the ceiling, and I would tape the molding. And this would be like my whole wall. Mm-hmm. And then in the corners, I would use an artist brush to get into all the corners. And then I would use a soft brush, a soft badger brush, just to soften it out.
So it looks like a very light touch.
Yeah, everything's light. I have a board here with color that I did. It's a faux finish, and it's the same technique. And on this, I have embossed stencils on it. But it just goes to show you, like in a different color, you could do the same thing, and it doesn't have to be clouds. But this looks awesome on a ceiling. I do have a page on Facebook called Strokes of Creativity. Uh-huh. That's where I have a lot of my artwork over the years of doing children's rooms and restaurants and I take a little water, or you could use alcohol. And I don't apply the clouds. I remove the paint to make the clouds.
Got it.
So it's a different technique. So,
do you find that the alcohol versus the water responds differently as you remove?
Yeah, no, it's the same. It's just as long as it's wet, that's the biggest thing is when you're faux finishing or glazing or is to keep the paint wet so you have more open time.
So making sure to pace yourself and work in sections if you're doing a whole wall, huh?
Oh, yeah, and you always work with the wet line. If you notice that when I put the glaze on, I stayed where the line was wet. I didn't go over where I had already applied it. And you could just, you know how like they have those like random like clouds out there that'll just like, it's kind of soft. And you know, when you throw a bird in here, it just,
I bet that really adds dimension quickly.
you could add gray into it. You could add a darker color into it if you wanted to add a little bit more. But really, when you put the water on it, you're just removing it. I mean, I've done angels on ceilings and all kinds of stuff over the years. It's backbreaking work, but if you're just doing a bathroom or something small, it's, and I have to say that, you know, when I was painting, it was very cathartic during my grief. Just spending, I didn't even listen to music, honestly, because I couldn't. It took me years before I was able to listen to music again. So I would just stay quiet in a room with my own thoughts and just paint.
That's so cool. You were making a living on it to support your kids, and you were getting some self-care and therapy.
I was giving myself therapy. I had no choice because I had to support my kids and I.
Right.
So I really didn't have a choice. It was the only way that I knew how to support us was to paint. It was, you know, it was funny that you have this gift that you're born with. I never really used it while I was raising my kids, but here I found myself in widowhood and I couldn't go back to what I had done because I'd have to go back to school. And my daughter was 11 at the time. I had 11, 14, and 18-year-old.
Wow.
And I'm in this huge house with bills coming in and I was panicking. What am I going to do? And I was like, I think I could do the painting. You know, I had done some jobs before, like painted stuff in my house. I was like, so I had a van. I took the seats out of the back of the van and I put ladders back there and crates. And that was it. Got ladders and just started going and started putting my business cards in paint stores. And it started to take off by word of mouth. People just, a neighbor would come in and said, who painted that grapevine? And they would give out my name, Strokes of Creativity, and it just started growing. I never really had to advertise.
God really provides, and you don't know when it's coming out. When that gifting is going to be useful and how it's going to be useful.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, you know, you use it for therapy. It was like therapy for me because it was calming, you know.
Yeah.
It was calming. Like, you know, I would plan my jobs ahead of time. So because I didn't have art schooling or anything like that, I had to rely on books. I would get, you can't see, but I have a whole shelf of books. And I would go to the library. I would spend hours there to take pictures, and I'd put pictures together. And if you go onto my my page on Facebook, you'll see like I would do like a jungle scene, and I would get different pictures from different books, and I would put them together to make this mural. And I knew like anything that was in the forefront would be large, and anything that was in the background would have to be small. And I would just do my own thing, and I just made it work. I never worried about it. I just did it.
Yeah.
I really had no choice. I had to bring in an income, and I had to do what I needed to do for my family. Right. I put a picture together here that I had from my group. I just want you to see, like,
oh my goodness,
how large we are. This was our last. We do a fundraiser walk once a year, and this was in 2019 before the pandemic. And since the pandemic, we do our groups on Zoom. So we're no longer just Long Island. We're all over the United States, and we have a few people from out of the country, which came to me from Instagram. You know, it really opened up a world for us, and we're able to help so many people stay connected. That was like my big thing. You know, when I lost my husband, there wasn't anything for someone my age that that was, I was widowed. I wasn't like single, like I didn't want to go to a bar.
Right.
I wasn't into bars. I was married for 20 years, so that wasn't my thing. And they had like one party like in our neighborhood called Parents Without Partners. It was all people that were older, and there was nothing for anyone that was in their 40s. So there was no connection with anyone that was my age that was widowed. And that's what I created with my group. Like I separate them by ages, and we have a group for those that don't have children. So someone's writing, my group are one of my best friends.
Yeah.
Carolyn. Yeah. That's the friendships. And Carolyn was in the No Children group, which is a great group because, years ago we'd sit together and it was like age 20 to 60, and some had children, some didn't. And that's a typical bereavement group, but our groups aren't typical. So we separate by ages. You don't have to listen to someone's children's loss. You connect better when it's similar. Which we've learned over the years of doing the groups, that the similarities are what makes us connect. And afterwards, the groups become like best friends. These are people who they can connect with that get it. It's so important for people to get it.
So sitting here, my mind's spinning as you were doing the clouds. I'm like, there's so many analogies to draw with. The removal of the color is what brings those clouds, and then as you just create a backdrop without having to think so much, it just helped you like keep your day moving. I know there was necessity. You had to pay bills, you had kids, but in your grief, in your darkest hour, all this beauty actually came out of it. And you had mentioned when we talked last time that helping others really is what saved your life.
That was after my second loss. So my first loss was my husband, and I did that to help others. I was already married and I was on my feet, and everyone kept saying, "Oh, you're doing this to help yourself?" And I was like, "No, I'm in a good place. I'm doing this to help others." And I would get annoyed that people kept saying that to me, And then 7 years ago, we lost my husband's oldest son, and I adopted his kids. So that was really a hard hit for us, and I didn't think I would go back to doing groups and whatever. And a couple of weeks after, I had seen a priest in my church, and he was like, "Just take the focus off yourself and focus on others." And I was like, "How am I going to do that?" And I was like, "I'll go back to doing the groups." That group absolutely helped me. Servicing other people and doing for other people really helps you take the focus off yourself. And that group helped me. And I've been doing the groups ever since. And I got that knowledge that I never had. I didn't know what people meant when they said, "Oh, you're doing this to help you." I didn't understand what that meant until the second loss. So the second loss really brought that to the forefront for me. And there is so much personal growth that comes with grief. Just like you're saying, like besides the painting and all that, it was a personal growth.
What do you think are the biggest things that you learned about yourself through your grief?
The biggest thing that I learned about myself was how strong I am. A lot of people say they hate it when people say you're strong because we don't really have a choice. But yeah, we do have choices. We have choices on how we're going to react to things. And, I've had triggers. I feel like my whole life, because between my husband and my son, like there's always triggers, and they're never going to go away. They're always going to be there. But it's how I react to the triggers that really matter. And I learned how to pause, take it in, say yes. That reminds me of him. And sometimes I'll share it with a friend, and sometimes I'll just, put it in my mind and say, yeah, that's him. And now I smile. And sometimes I feel like it's a sign from my husband that he's still with me. So ironically, my husband's name is Lawrence, and I live on Lawrence Lane. So there's a lot of little signs, over the years that my husband has given me to let me know that he's always around. So when they happen, I'm just like, okay, I smile. I go, there's that expression, I know it's you. But yeah, I know that it's him. So those little things have gotten me through.
Kathryn, what do you think, as you've led so many groups all these years, and you've been through it, 2 different major losses for you, how do you help people find that time of like allowing time for that grief and sadness and pain? And then when do you shift over to like it's time to do some self-care, it's time to reach out to others? How do you help people navigate when it's time to make those shifts?
Well, we don't put a time limit on anything. So
Right.
in our area, in our area, there you can't get into a bereavement group until you're 3 months after your loss. So that's
Okay.
one of the rules that I broke right away. I was like, nope, we're not doing that. We also don't sit around and share the grief. We're really about moving forward. So a lot of people say, like, I'm not ready. And I'm like, what do you think you're ready for? Are you ready to get tools to move ahead and help yourself with your grief? Because if you're ready for that, then that's what the group is about. So there's like a preconceived notion of what the group is about, that I try to break that. I also feel that I could give you all the information that will help you heal. But if you're not ready to receive it, it won't do anything. So if I know you're not ready to receive it, I'll just hold space for you and I'll validate what you're going through. And I'll wait till I know that you're ready to receive. And all of a sudden you see like people like, I'm having an aha moment. I'm getting it now, Kathryn. I get it. Yeah.
What are some of those signs that indicate that they're at that aha moment, they're ready for that next step?
It's just what they say. It's like they'll say, I'm tired. I'm so tired of crying all the time. And I think that's like one of the surprising things about grief is how exhausting it is.
So
And
exhausting.
at the end of the day, you're like, I never needed a sleeping pill. I would just pass out between painting and climbing ladders and the mind going constantly thinking about my husband 24/7. That would just make me exhausted where I would just pass out at night. But I just think that we get to, a certain time where we just feel like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. Like I used to go to the cemetery every day and I knew at some point, like, I can't do this anymore. I felt like I was in the coffin with him. Like I wasn't living life. I was also burying myself. And I don't think that anyone's loved one wants them not to live life. Like I asked in my group one time, what would you say to your spouse if it was the other way around? And everyone said similar things. They said, I would tell them to live life, enjoy life, do everything you got, but they're not doing it. But that's what they would tell their spouse. So when you start to think like that, you start to say, yeah, well, maybe that is what they would want for me. And I could bury this guilt and, bury the expectation of what I thought my life was going to be.
That's like that secondary grief that you go through after you lose someone.
The secondary losses are really big. I was just talking to someone last night. She said, I hate taking out the garbage. It's like those are things that people just don't think about that we have to do. I mean, for 20 years, my husband took out the garbage. Now I'm taking out the garbage. I'm driving the kids back and forth to carpool, to different things for school, after school activities, because they don't drive yet. And then I still have my responsibilities. And now I'm working full time. It's just overwhelming. So it's nice to have someone to validate what you're going through, to understand what you're going through. And that's what the groups provide. We're just there for each other. Sometimes you just need somebody you can complain to, that you don't feel bad you're complaining, that they say, you know what, I get it. I did it too.
Well, I think that's one of the benefits of the way you separate your groups by stage of life and age and things like that. So they don't have to explain it as much because you just get it. Because you're in. I know every loss is different, and we're not comparing losses, but when there's a lot of similarities, you don't have to explain it all.
It's big because the younger people are raising children, and that's different than someone who's older in life and their kids are older or grown and they're coming home to an empty house. Yeah. So there are different things, and the younger people will get together with their children, where the older people will be able to get together more frequently because they don't have the children, and it's easy for them to get together, often. So it's a different situation. It's hard when you have someone young in the room with someone who's older, because their life, the secondary losses are different.
Yes. What words of wisdom can you give to people
Well,
about some self?
self-care, yeah, self-care is real big for me. I feel like for the 5 years before I remarried, I really didn't do a lot of self-care. There's two things that I always tell my group. The ones that have young children, like myself, is that your children's life has already been compromised, and they only get one childhood, and it's up to you to do what you can for them. But you also need to do things like take vacations with them and sit down and have dinner time with them. Like, because I was always working, we were just rushing. We were just like passing shifts. And we really didn't do enough family time. It's something that I look back at and I regret. Not to the point where it stops me from moving forward, but just something that I had to work, with my children. Like my daughter, that was my youngest. Later on in life, I kind of worked on our relationship because I realized later on what I had done. But I was so into grief, you don't see what you're doing. And the other thing is do something for you. Like get your nails done, get your toes done, go for a massage, go outside, take a walk in nature. All those things, they're for you. And you need to take care of you because how are you going to function if you don't take care of you? And the most important thing is to get a good night's sleep. Because a lot of times people are weepy because they're not sleeping right. And so then the next day they're so weepy. We need our rest. It's how we, readjust.
It's amazing what happens when we sleep. It really is a gift to be able to sleep, and it's an important thing to make time for. The bills will come, all those other things will come at us, but if we don't sleep, our brain doesn't function right, our hormones go out of whack. It's important.
And then you're snapping at your kids, and then you're frustrated, and it's like that displaced anger. You then snap at other people, and it's just not healthy, So a good night's sleep is real important, and it's not selfish to do something nice for yourself. Every once in a while, I'd buy myself something, and I'd say, "Oh, Larry bought this for me."
That's a cool spin. Yeah.
He would want me to have something nice, so I'd say, "Oh, he bought this for me," So it's a nice way of self-care.
I always tell people, and I've heard it said from others as well, like we can't give out of an empty tank. We can't give what we don't have.
I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And I do too, because I listen to grief all the time. I get calls every day. This weekend, because it was a holiday weekend, I had 8 people waiting for me to call them back. So that's listening to 8 losses in one day, calling people back. And I take time for myself too. I practice what I preach. I make sure I go for walks. Especially this past year, it was real stressful because we didn't have a lot of distractions, so it was real important to, walk in nature and do the self-care. Yeah, and it looks like things are opening up again, so it's really hopeful. Yeah, I know.
It's going to relieve a lot of pressure on people.
I'm hoping that we could possibly do our groups hybrid for the fall. I'm waiting to get answers to see whether we can meet in person or not. And if that's the case, I would do half and half. Yeah, it would be nice because the Zoom works out nice for people that are out of the state.
Yeah, are you creating or training facilitators just within Long Island, or are you training facilitators so they can open these in other states as well?
Yes, I've been training people in other states. I trained over 30 people over the last few months. I trained a girl from Africa and Malaysia. I've given them the whole, I have a book that's being published. I have 2 books actually that are being edited. One is my autobiography and one is a facilitator guidebook that I'm hoping, soon it'll be done being editing, and I finished with the publishing and it'll be out there soon. It's just a lot of work putting it together, but it would be helpful for people who want to do this, in their area. We need more of the moving forward group, not sitting around going over the grief over and over and over again, talking about the same story, especially the suicide groups, because we get a lot of people with suicide. And it's just like the girls say to me, I'll go to the meeting and it's like 13 years and they're still repeating the same story. Like they're stuck, on the same story 13 years later. I don't want to be like that 13 years later.
Yeah.
So
they're stuck and they're almost like re-traumatizing themselves and each other every meeting. And while there's value in telling the story, at some point it's really important to make that shift to how are we going to move forward? How are we going to heal?
I just recently read. Yeah, I just recently read that people from 9/11, every time they play it on the TV, they're re-traumatized.
Yeah.
And how it's not healthy to keep going over that. We have to move away from that and talk about how we're going to move forward and what we're going to do now.
Yeah, and honoring the people that we've lost.
Absolutely. That's real
Part
important.
of that, adjusting to life without them. You're not moving forward does not mean forgetting. But yeah, so how can people who want to join up with one of your groups or become a facilitator, how can they best get in touch with you for those things?
Sure, they could reach out to me at Widowed Not Alone on Instagram, or they could email me at widowednotalone@aol.com. If they want to look at my artwork, some of the clouds in action, on Strokes of Creativity on Facebook. Yeah, so I'd be happy to hear from anyone that's interested in facilitating. We usually like people to be at least a year after their loss before they facilitate, and they can facilitate for us or they can facilitate on their own.
Nice. And I will put all those links in the newsletter that comes out this week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone who came and watched.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.